Drew Brees thinks the Saints are loaded headed into 2023. Lance Moore and Drew Brees, a couple of Saints legends here, talking about the Saints' future. They're answering a question: what does Drew think of this year's draft class, squad, and DA's mentality? And where does he think the Saints will finish this year? Massive Saints fan, who dat from the UK in it. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Look, I think all the pieces are in place. I mean, the division is wide open, certainly. But at the same time, I think the Saints have always, we've built a level of expectation that goes beyond just, taking care of our division.
That's well said, Drew. That's actually, Drew is kind of the first person besides me who has been saying that. I've heard a lot of people say, let's win the division. Guys, the division is terrible. Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Carolina are three of the worst teams in the NFL. None of them have quarterbacks. All of them are unknown. We have Derek Carr. We've spent a ton of money to get Derek Carr. We got Michael Thomas coming back. We had a lot of draft picks who will play. Okay, we've done a lot. We have Chris Olave in the second season. We have the pieces. We shouldn't just be saying, let's go over 500 and let's win the division. I heard someone the other day saying that last year was a success because we were over 500. What the hell are y'all talking about? This is the New Orleans Saints, okay? This is the Superdome. You're not supposed to be a 500 team. Drew is 100% correct. The Saints totally reshaped their culture, totally reshaped expectations. The Saints were a team that was a laughingstock and a joke. When I was growing up, the Saints were expected to be bad and were bad. Brees and Payton changed all that, and we can't lose sight of that. The Saints should be vying for the NFC Championship this year, not just the division.
And I'd say, everybody's probably been pretty disappointed with the last 2 years. And
yes, I have been incredibly disappointed and incredibly vocal on this channel about that. The reason we have been bad is because we're rotating Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian. Like we don't have any stability at quarterback. We went from Drew Brees, a lot of people think, including me, the second best quarterback to ever live. We went from that and Sean Payton to Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, whose headset's not even plugged in, and Trevor Siemian. So, of course, we're going to be non-competitive, we'll call it. But now that we have Derek Carr, I'm not saying he's Drew Brees, but he's not Trevor Siemian, okay? So we should be competing. The pieces are there, for sure. This is the best roster we've gone into a season with since Brees left. And you could even argue the last year of Brees' career where he was hurt and he wasn't he wasn't the same player. You can even argue is better than that year. So the Saints should be ultra competitive. Not winning the division to me would be fireable for Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael. It would be a damning failure of Derek Carr. That is almost like the floor. If we just win the division, get bounced in the first round of the playoffs, or win one playoff game, that's right at what you should be doing, like the floor of what you should be doing. Winning the division, winning your hosted playoff game, and that's it. That should be like, all right, step one. Now what? What's the goals? The goals should be multiple playoff wins, a trip to the NFC Championship game. That should be where the Saints are. And I'm not hearing enough local media and fans acting like it. I'm glad Brees is saying that, because now the only people saying that are me and Drew.
We've suffered through a lot, injuries and such. But I think coming into this year, the excitement around bringing in Derek Carr. Look, I think he's a great fit for our system. I've always
we don't have a system.
Him as a player. Felt like he was in a really tough situation with the Raiders. Probably got a lot of the blame when he did not deserve it. I think it's a fresh start for him. I think it's a great fit for him. And
yeah, it's definitely a fresh start for him, for sure.
I think the city will embrace him as well.
Yeah, probably.
I think from a skill position perspective on offense, I'd say we're pretty loaded.
We are.
And I think up front we're really, really good with the offensive line. So, you always start there, your ability to control the line.
I don't know if we're really, really good, but skill position-wise, and loaded is a lot. But we're definitely good. Like, we're definitely better than Carolina and some of these other teams who I've been hearing people kind of give love to. Skill position-wise, roster-wise, we are much more talented than the likes of, Green Bay, some of these other teams that people have been throwing around in these like NFC discussions. When you look at it, we are right there roster wise. And Derek Carr is a top three-ish, top 3, top 4, somewhere in there quarterback in the entire conference. So yeah, I agree with Drew. We loaded a lot, but we are very talented compared to the rest of the NFC.
Line of scrimmage, but we got weapons. We got weapons. We got a guy to distribute it. So that should be fun to watch come together. Defensively, I'd say that was the part where you lose a couple interior linemen in free agency. You lose an edge rusher. It looks like we made efforts to try to shore that up.
Yeah, we did. The draft was great. Mickey did great in the draft. We shored up, or at least got players to try and shore up some of those problems. Interior defensive line for sure, like I was saying. Linebackers, we're okay as far as like putting people in places that we needed to put people in places in. The question mark is going to be, as it always is, Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael.
Through free agency to bring some guys in, and obviously first round pick, we draft a D lineman. So when you think about that, I think we're pretty solid at the linebacker position and in the secondary. But again, that's just, I started thinking about it. If I was the head coach, if I was, DA, going into this offseason, and you'll remember this, Lance, just, from some of our eras, right, with the Saints was, man, I felt like the best seasons we had were a result of highly, highly competitive off seasons.
Interesting. And I like that. But that's culture. And what Drew is not mentioning here is that was driven by Sean Payton. That was driven by a different head coach. And I said it last year, but DA and Pete Carmichael sucked the life out of the culture of the Saints, even in the Dome. I was at every home game. In the Dome, it was not the same. It did not feel the same. It didn't look the same. The fans weren't the same, all that stuff. That's not to say that he can't, bring the culture back or figure it out, but that is Dennis Allen's biggest challenge right now, is establishing a culture, because you can't establish Sean Payton's culture. Sean Payton's not there. It's unfair for Dennis Allen to be like, hey, replicate what Sean Payton's culture was like. They're not the same person. If you are going to trust Dennis Allen as the head coach, which, let me go ahead and say this, I do not. But if you're going to trust Dennis Allen as the head coach, you have to allow him to put in his culture. What will his culture be? Time will tell. But I do agree with Drew here that he's going to have to implement one. It's now time for him to take this offseason, put his stamp on it. If he wants an ultra competitive offseason, if he wants, however he wants to do it, he's got to do it. Because the Saints are only going to go as far as whatever this new culture he creates is. He didn't do one in Oakland, and he hasn't done one here at this point. So he's got to do it in the next couple months.
And I know the offseason has changed quite a bit, in regards to how much time you're allowed to spend at the facility doing various things and, what you're accomplishing in the OTAs and that kind of thing. But, man, once you get to training camp, to me, that's all-out war on the other side of the ball, right? And especially when I think to 9, 10, and 11, 09, 2010, and 2011, I approached every day trying to destroy our defense, and I think that they took the same approach, right? That was Vilma and Fujita and, Malcolm and Roman and all the guys on the other side of the ball that they had the same mentality towards us, right?
It almost hurts listening to Drew talk because, it just goes to show what people don't see. People just look at results or what happens on Sundays or what happens on, game day, and they talk about the plays and they talk about the roster, but what, Hall of Fame players, what great players bring in the offseason, in the locker room, all that kind of stuff, that just, it's so understated. And what Drew's talking about, all of this is just goes to show how good of a coach Sean Payton was and how good of a leader, quarterback, locker room the Saints had. The Saints had a ton of these personalities. Drew obviously on the offensive side of the ball, but he just listed a few like Jonathan Vilma and players like that, and maybe Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and all that can be that in the locker room right now. And maybe Derek Carr can step into a leadership role for the offense. But that has absolutely been missing from the Saints, and it is expected for that hole to be there. Like I said previously, it's hard to lose one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever live and one of the greatest coaches to ever coach. It's hard to lose that simultaneously and not have a hole. So it's okay that we've had a couple of years where we're kind of in the unknown. But at this point now, you've got Derek Carr, you got Dennis Allen after a couple of years. Someone's going to have to instill that culture. And it's interesting that that's what Drew's talking about. He really kind of gave a meh answer on the roster. He just said, hey, we've got talent for sure. But a majority of his answer has been built around the offseason, the culture, the locker room, all that stuff. And I agree with him. That is much more important that the Saints rebuild that. It's much more important that we rebuild the culture than the interior defensive line, which is all anybody talks about. All anybody's talked about this offseason is interior defensive line, linebackers, secondary, running back depth. But no one's talking about how do we get back to being the New Orleans Saints.
And so it was really like you were getting ready for a playoff game every day in practice. And so by the time we got to the season, I felt like, well, we're not going to face anything in the season that would be better than what we've been facing every day in training camp, And I think that's just a mentality, and that's really just you flipping the switch and saying, like, I'm approaching this each and every day as, iron sharpens iron, but like, I'm trying to kick your ass. Like every day I'm trying to win. Right. And
God, what a guy.
In the process, you're going to make each other a heck of a lot better. And by the time you get to the season, look, you're going to be tired of beating up on each other, but you're also going to be ready.
What a guy. God, I miss you, Drew. We miss you. We miss you, pal. Lance, thanks for your thoughts during this interview. Guys, let me know in the comments below. What do you think? What do you think? You think Drew was right? Do you think Drew was off? Do you think I was right? Do you think I was off? What do you think about the culture going into the season? Do you think Derek Carr and Dennis Allen can instill that new culture? Let me know in the comments below what you all think going into this. Thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate every single view. You could be anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with me. And I really, really do tip my cap to that. I will see you in the next video, ladies and gentlemen.